I've got a bowl here, and I was going to show a bowl blank, and I was going to go ahead and make this today, but I thought I would do a video on how we mount bowls on the lathe throughout the whole process. And there was some specific questions about how to make a mortise, and I would think people would have a similar question about how to make a tenon if you wanted to go that route for mounting your bowls on your chuck. So I kind of want to go through the options for you as a beginner. So one option is we can take a worm screw, and each chuck normally comes with a worm screw that fits the chuck. And so you would find the center of your bowl blank, and you would drill a hole that's, you know, slightly smaller than the threads. The chuck probably tells you what size hole that should be. And it is important that you use the right size drill bit so that it just fits in perfectly and it's splitting your wood, not too tight, not too loose. So you would screw that into your bowl blank. Then you would take your whole bowl blank and you would put it in your chuck, and you would tighten it down. Now, if you want to use the worm screw, the important thing is that you use the biggest jaws that you have on your chuck. And it's important also to have a pretty flat surface if you're going to use the worm screw. The reason is those jaws are going to sit flush. When you screw this in on the worm screw and you put it in here, these jaws are going to be sitting on the outside of this bowl. And so the bigger the jaws are, the less, you know, the more resistance to torque or leverage that their bowl blank will have. And so that will keep it from being able to move as much. If you had smaller jaws, then you've got this giant bowl and it's being held against jaws that are that big. And so you just don't have a very good foundation. So the bigger the jaws you have, the better. So that's one option, using the worm screw. And this is a rough blank. This is what you would first start with. So you would put it in here, then you would screw that in, and you'd put your bowl blank up here, okay? Another option is a faceplate. So here's the faceplate for my lathe that came with my lathe. You would put that on the center of your bowl, and you would take wood screws and you would screw that in, okay? And that'll put that firmly on your lathe. And then I'll take this off so you can see it. And after you screw this on, you would just pick your whole bowl blank up and you would screw your bowl blank on, okay? Right, like that. That's another way. This, to me, is, I've had worm screws move and shift on me. I've never had anything come off or shift that's been screwed in with the faceplate like that. So I think the faceplate, if I'm doing a bigger bowl like this, I would use a faceplate. If I'm doing a small bowl, the worm screw's a little quicker, and you don't have the screw depth that you're putting in screws. You only have the screw that's in the middle of your bowl. And so you're going to take that wood away anyway later. So if you're doing smaller bowls, the worm screw is a nice quick option that I often use. Okay, here is another option. And this is another faceplate, and you would center that up and you would screw it in. But the neat thing about this faceplate is it's got dovetail on the outside. It's dovetailed for a tenon. So I can take the jaws of my chuck and put over it and then tighten the jaws around this. Or I can take the jaws on another chuck that I have and I can put it in and expand it into this dovetail. So this is really nice because I want to screw this in and I can leave my chuck on here and I can put my bowl blank on. I can make my tenon or mortise on the other side of the bowl and leave my chuck on. I just have to take this off. If you do the worm screw or the other faceplate, after I get I would mount this up here, and after I get my tenon or mortise, I would have to take this off and then screw my chuck on. It's just one less step that you have to do. If you use this faceplate, you don't have to take your chuck off and on. So we'll show that. And you want to use nice, strong wood screws. You don't want to use like drywall screws or something for this. There we go. Got the chuck on here. I'm going to open this up so that it'll fit around this. We'll put it up here. And we'll crank this down. And I got that clamped on there. And that's how that will mount. And now we will move the tailstock up to offer some extra support. You always want to do that. So move your tailstock up to where you can get that in there and offer a little extra support. That just keeps that thing from being able to come off, gives you a little bit more stability, okay?
I'd like for you to just listen, use your hearing as another sense, and that way you can tell how out of balance the piece of wood is, and you know how careful you need to be just to get the thing round. The beginning is always going to be the more difficult part. I'm going to move this camera around so you can see a little better how I attack this, but start at the bottom of the bowl where you are peeling the side grain off. Don't try to get the end grain cut off at the end. It's much easier to attack that after you get this rounded to where you get bevel support.
The other nice thing about the tailstock being up there is that when you turn it off, it will keep this from coming off. I never used the set screw on my chuck because I always forget to loosen it, and I was damaging the threads. So while this is out of balance, I'll leave the tailstock up here. This is really out of balance because this piece of wood has this big curve in it, so it's going to keep me from being able to get the speed up for a little bit here. But I'm going to hopefully be able to get this tool rest a little closer, and then we'll be able to get some more action.
Now you can see a little bit better how I'm approaching this bowl. I'm starting out there on the flatter part of the bottom where I'm kind of peeling that side grain off, trying to get this thing, just get some of the unbalance out of it so I can get the speed up. What I have with the flute there is the bowl gouge is turned with the flute at about 45 degrees open there. So the flute would be kind of facing me at an angle. Hopefully you can see that. I would have to turn it another 45 degrees, then the flute would be straight up in the air, is what I'm trying to say. And then I'm trying to rub the bevel, but there's not much to rub because it's so out of balance. And as you start getting it more balanced, that's when it really gets easy. Not really trying to worry about making smooth cuts here. This is all about removing waste, just getting rid of material. So not trying to be careful with having rough grain, tear out or anything like that. This is about being aggressive. That's why I've got the 5/8 gouge here. I've got a fairly long handle to kind of manhandle this because it's out of balance. And it starts to become easier and easier as you go. And then once you can turn the speed up, then it really gets easy.
There's a big knot right here that is going to make turning this, and you can tell it's going to make turning this difficult. Plus, it's going to make it not really stable if it's not dry. So this is going to look kind of cool, but it's going to make this a difficult bowl to turn. If you ran into that, just be aware that maybe it's not your turning. It sometimes can be the wood itself that's making it difficult. Finally got this up to about 700 RPM.
Now, I'll talk to you a little bit about dull gouges whenever you're cutting dry wood, especially when they're big bowls like this. You're cutting a lot of wood in a short amount of time. So I didn't sharpen my gouge. I switched over to a 40/40 grind bowl gouge. It already had sharpened. And, you know, I've kind of been playing with that for the last year, maybe less than a year. And it does a good job.
I almost have it round now. That crack is really going deep. So we may have to do some work on that before we can finish that. Let me move this tool rest to get the end. Now remember, I'm doing 700 RPM. 700 RPM by, I think this bowl is pretty large. This bowl is about 14 to 15 inch diameter. So inches per second, you would have 14 times 3.14. So 15 times 3 that's 45 inches every second that I'm cutting. So that's pretty fast. I mean, I'm sorry. That's 45 inches every revolution that I'm cutting, and I'm doing 700 revolutions per minute.
And here's the formula as I was blabbering around. It's a 14-inch diameter bowl, so you would times that by 3.14 or pi, times the speed of your lathe. Here I was running 700 RPMs. You would divide all of that by 60 to get it to seconds, and that was 513 inches per second, or 43 feet per second that the lathe, or that the tool bowl gouge is cutting. That's why you have to sharpen them more often than you think.
gonna be a beautiful bowl. We have a big knot here. This is gonna make things unstable and wanna crack even more. And there's some cracks. You can see this crack going up through here. So that's not super safe. This crack here, you got another big knot and a crack coming down. So, you know, we're gonna have to be careful. When you make this bowl thin, that's gonna be dangerous. So we'll just have to be careful with what we do. Okay, we're gonna put on mortise in here for our jaws. And I just wanted to show you, on the big bowls, I've switched. I used to do a tenon, which a tenon would be a dovetail tenon like this, and then you would clamp down on the tenon with your jaws. There's another example. Here, I have, I don't have a sander in my shop. And so I made a sander to put on my lathe, and I can put it on with my jaws, which I can clamp down on the tenon here, and you can see the dovetail, or I can expand into the mortise here, depending on if I have my small jaws on, to chuck with my small jaws or my big jaws. So I can make this fit either, and that gives me a sander. I used to do tenons all the time, and tenons work great. Now I mainly do tenons on small bowls, because if you did a mortise, I'd have to put in really small jaws, and you just lose so much of your bowl when you do a mortise there. It's really a preference thing for me. The reason I do the mortise more so these days is because I will put the mortise in here, and I will finish this bowl on the outside, and I won't have to touch this again. So I'll finish this mortise, and I won't have to touch this again. If you do the tenon, you're gonna finish this best you can. You're gonna clamp your jaws on here. Then you're gonna turn the inside of your bowl. Then you're gonna have to flip this around and either hold it with a vacuum chuck, or you're gonna have to use one of those cold jaws to turn the tenon off. And so it's just one extra step if you do the tenon that you don't have to do if you do the mortise. So if you make the mortise look like your finished product. So I'll show you how I do the mortise. And the way I do the mortise is probably not always the same. I probably grab whatever tool I have available at the time. And so I will use a bowl gouge in here. I'll use detail gouges, spindle gouges. Remember, this is side grain here for the most part. I will use skew chisels and parting tools, but I'm mainly using those skew chisels and parting tools or carbide scrapers. I'm using them all as a scraper. I'm not using them where I'm rubbing the bevel. So there was a question that came up the other day, can you use a parting tool to create your mortise? And that is yes, but you're not going to use your parting tool as like rubbing the bevel, like you normally would use a parting tool when you're doing spindle work. And so let me see if I can get this in the camera. If you were going to be making your tenon, you would not want to use your parting. You wouldn't want to come in with a parting tool like you would on spindle work and rub the bevel to make that tenon. Or you also wouldn't want to use your skew chisel like that, rubbing the bevel like you would on a tenon. The reason is because this is end grain coming at us, which you can watch some of my other videos. I talk a lot about the grain. Watch the one on how bowl gouges work, and I'll explain why you don't want to do that. This will catch and cause a major problem. So if you did come in here with a parting tool, you're going to want to come in and use it as a scraper like this, scraping the material away, or even with the skew chisel, you're going to come in and you're going to be using it as a scraper. You're never going to cut into that grain. So you're going to want to make sure that your tool is slightly down or level, since it's a negative rake scraper. Basically, your skew is a negative rake scraper. Your parting tool, if you're using it like that, is also a negative rake scraper, okay? So don't come in and rub that bevel like that. pretty much prefer though to use a detail gouge or a bowl gouge in this fashion, except you don't want to get the wing hitting in here, because then you're cutting into the grain again. So you just got to be careful of that. You can also use, you know, I got these easy tool scrapers. You could use one of those type scraper tools to come in here and get your dovetail with the for the tenon. So there's many different ways. Just be cognizant and think about where the grain is and make sure that you're not, you know, cutting up into the end grain to where it's going to catch and blow apart on you. Which I've had happen whenever, you know, probably a decade ago, I was using a parting tool and that'll catch and it snapped my parting tool into many pieces. So be careful doing that if you're doing the tenon. Well, we're going to turn it on and we're going to try to create our mortise here. Well, I'll start out with cutting this with a bowl gouge. Try to get that as flat as I can. Right like that. That's pretty good. And then I've got these set for the jaw thickness. And I just get in here close and kind of mark it. And then I see how that lines up. And that's about where I want it. Okay? Right in there. So you can use multiple tools here. You could use your bowl gouge if you want. Actually, if I come in here, I'm cutting side grain. So you can use your bowl gouge like that to do peeling cuts if you want. You could also come in here with a parting tool of some kind. Again, you're not going to try to rub the bevel and go up in that fashion. It's not really what you're trying to do here. You can just use this like a what's going on? You can use it like a scraper. So I'm just using that like a negative rate scraper. Or you can get like a skew chisel in here and use it like a negative rake scraper. Okay. You can use any of those fashions to get that dovetail in there. You could also use a detail gouge.
And I apologize, but the camera angle did not show how these tools really are cutting, making this mortise. So if there's a specific tool that you want to see a different camera angle showing this, please let me know in the comments and I will try to provide one for you.
You can also use a detail gouge and come in. This works pretty good. This is a pretty big bowl, so I probably want a pretty good mortise in here. But you can start shaping it in the shape of the bowl here if you want. Meaning this bottom here can stay fairly close to the bottom. As long as the bowl's going to sit out here and not be in trouble hitting in the middle. And that's what I'm going to do, just kind of bring that in there. And you can use a scraper here to just kind of make sure that all looks good. And then we can sand this if we want. It's pretty good there. Okay, I'm gonna come in here with this. Skew chisel works pretty good, really. Okay, right like that. And I think and a parting tool. I've got a small parting tool that's really, really detailed from D-Way, and you can get in there with it if you want. Again, you're using it as a scraper. You're not trying to rub the bevel, okay? But I really kind of like the skew chisel awful well. It does a good job. To give the whole thing a finished look. Like that. Let's turn it off and look at it. So we've got a nice detail. It's a dovetail in. And I actually think that's probably enough because there's quite a bit of wood out here that we can expand into. So I think this will work. Like I said, I like to finish my mortise. So I'm gonna go ahead and sand this a little bit with some maybe some 120 sandpaper, then up to 220, and then finish this up. So we're just gonna kind of finish this foot up. We're gonna kind of get down in that corner there, because we're gonna make this a final product. Some 120. Looks pretty good. What is this here? This is 220. It'd be nice to have some 150 right before that, but I don't see any, so I'll probably just finish it up here with the 220. I'll come in here. A little 120. I like to dull that edge there a little bit. I want this to be the foot. We should be able to get to the rest of this if we want to finish it and sand it with the chuck on, so it won't be an issue. I'm gonna go ahead and put finish on here. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this, put some oil, wax, just like I would normally finish it. There we go, nice and smooth. This is ready to go. I'll just put after I get done, take the chuck off, after the bowl's done, I will, put a new, just rub on a quick little finish of wax, which is what I use, mineral oil wax type finish, tongue oil wax type finish, whatever. It's a wood butter. You can watch the video on how to make that. It's real simple. That's what this is, just some beeswax and mineral oil. And I think I had a little abrasive in it just to smooth that out. So it's really nice. Now I'm gonna put the chuck on and finish the bowl. So remember, I put on the faceplate dovetail. So all I gotta do is loosen this. There it is right there. And then I'm gonna put this back on. But now I'm gonna do a mortise. So I'm gonna close these jaws so that it fits on here. Right inside that. Now I'm going to expand the jaws into it, pushing pressure in, right like that. And there we go. So there it is. And now I can take this off with my drill. And these are really short screws. Really don't need them really long with this because it's so not much metal. It's like probably 1/4 of an inch thick. And there's 6 screws here. There's no need to shove a 3-inch screw in through that, so that works really nice. Everybody has a different method for getting the depth of the bowl. I like to just put up a drill bit and just kind of see about where I want the depth to be. It don't have to be precise. I like to leave myself a little wiggle room. So I'm gonna drill a hole about that big. First, I wanna make sure it's in the center. So briefly, I'm gonna turn on and find the center with the lathe on. So there's the center, found it right there. And so I'll just put this on real quick. And I'll drill a hole. Double check where I want that. That gives me a little wiggle room. I'm giving myself a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch so that I won't have a hole there. So that gives me close though. So when I get to where I turn the hole out, I know that I'm close to the depth that I want to be.
Now this video is at 2x speed, just to speed things up a little bit, save a little time. Nothing too exciting here. It's not balanced. The wood's still not balanced on this side. So the bottom of the bowl is balanced, but not the inside here. So I didn't do that when it was on the chuck, so I'm doing it now. So there's nothing too exciting here. Trying to get to where we can rub the bevel continually. So just be careful when you start the cut, the hip edge is right there. Make sure you can get your bevel rubbing before you start coming in. If not, you want to swing that tool handle all the way to the right of this screen. So that just the tip of your bowl gouge is how you start the cut. That'll give you a shoulder to rub the bevel on. I'm kind of cheating here and not doing that because this is more like a platter and I find it pretty easy to control. But if you find that your bowl gouge kind of jumps on you and races to the lip, then that's what you want to do is bring that tool handle all the way to the right of this screen, and when you start with the tip. Slow the video down now. Here I am trying to just get this continually across, perfectly balanced and flat. Now we're just trying to get to the bottom of that depth hole. Just kind of working my way down with each pass, getting rid of those rings. I don't always do it this way. Sometimes I go all the way from the rim to the center, and then from the rim to the center, and just continue doing that. With this time when I was making the bowl, I kind of did those rings there where you come down and stop just before you get that wing to hit. So be careful with that if you do this method, to make sure that you just don't let that wing hit on one of those inner rings. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, so we're almost to the end of the hole. So I have a little bit more depth I can go, but not a whole lot. So probably if I bring this in, it's gonna get close. It's gonna be somewhat of a shallow bowl. What a beautiful figure here though. It's gonna look nice. The bottom feeder gouge. You can use these. You can use your fingers. Your fingers will not lie to you, so I can tell right there that my fingers are coming farther apart. Or you can get you some of these calipers, and you can see that it's coming apart right in there. So I still have a good 1.5 to 2 inches of thickness down at the bottom. So I've got some depth I can work with here. Now, there's some cracks out here that we showed at the beginning of the video, and I think I might want to seal those up before I proceed, because this thing could blow apart even if I don't do anything wrong. There's just does not look like a stable bowl blank to me, and makes me a little nervous. That's why you saw me kind of standing away. I hope I can save it though, because this grain down here is amazing, so hope I can save it. I may turn it a little bit more to get this to shape down here, but then I'm gonna put some epoxy on and we'll finish that in a day or two.
Now I'm going to sand the bowl. It's pretty well done. These sanding pads here you can get from off of Amazon. You can get them from Packard Wood Tool Works, or wherever that wood turning catalog is that I use. You can get them from Wood Turning Wonders. There's a lot of different people that have them. They work really well. You don't get the scratch marks that you would if you just use normal sandpaper. And now I'm just going to apply some of my homemade wood butter finish. This one is a lighter wood with some darker grains in it. So I don't like using oils, that yellow in that, because it takes the lighter part of the wood and will darken it. And so it just kind of gets rid of some of the effect that I like in grain patterns. I really like the natural lighter wood. And then I like the darker wood there. So I'm not using the one that has the tung oil in it or linseed oil or anything. So this is just mineral oil and beeswax mixed together. Apply a healthy part with a napkin. That way it doesn't get caught while I buff it out there. Looks great.